Welcome back to the Arbitrage.Run show with your host Donkey Teeth and Kevin from Arbitrage Racing. What's happening, Kevin?
So Donkey, thanks for letting me be on the left this time. This is my good side.
I don't know how that happened. It's I guess it's random. I must have clicked you first. So Kevin, we've got our second guest, very special guest coming on the show today. Let's bring him on. Our buddy Keith from Crimson Racing. What's happening, Keith?
What's up, guys? Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. It's you haven't been streaming enough. Zook has like kicked you off the pony plug, so
I know. No, I'm. We've upgraded now. Arbitrage. I think I'm newest member, right? What's my ownership here? What are we talking?
We'll see. We'll play some pickleball for it, right? That's what
Zook
wants to do.
Yeah, it's performance dependent, so a lot of pressure here. So anyway, I'm just to let our audience know, I'm going to be gone starting in December. So I'm going to be gone for like 3 weeks, and Keith will be filling in for at least one or two of those shows. So we wanted to bring you on, Keith, and kind of introduce you to the audience. And if they hate you, then you're out. All right.
Hey, it's big shoes to fill, but I'll do my best.
Oh, you're not filling in for Kevin or anything.
No, that would be even bigger shoes. I just want yours. You're a tall guy, big shoes.
Literally big shoes. Yeah, not figurative. So yes, thanks for coming on, Keith. Today's show, we're going to talk a little bit more about the class update and progression and how that's going to work. I kind of found a thread out on Twitter that I thought was interesting for us to discuss on how. Kevin and I already kind of discussed it a little bit on last week's show about how the level system will work and maybe be applied. Of course, this will all be speculation, but hey, what's more fun than speculation on how Zed is going to build things out? And then we're going to do a little Lucky Maiden recap in the middle. And then Keith, as we were discussing some show topics with you in our chat, you've got some rant that you would like to throw at everybody about current Zed vernacular and lexicon. Yeah, no, we're excited to have this conversation. So without further ado, let's dive in on you know what, I wanted to mention the I almost said it, the Metaverse Cup. Yeah. Ooh, I almost got sued there.
Get you. You'll be gone for more than 3 weeks if you say that.
The private mint just sold out in like 2 minutes. It was crazy. So I mean, I don't know if anybody doubts that there are Zedders lurking in the background, just waiting for some positive news. Is there any more proof of that than this 2 minute sellout of 500 passes, Kevin?
No, I mean, I think this was unique too, because like you had to have a bunch of stables to do this, and the way it sold out, it would have been tough to get a bunch of multiple ones. So that's got to be fairly close to 500 unique users, you would hope. But yeah, it tends to happen that way, right? Like the crypto community loves a good mint, and this one is very defined in terms of like the fun you're going to get out of it, the competition. So it's a new update for Zed, and people are starved for updates. So I'm not surprised, but I am surprised it was 2 minutes. I kind of thought it'd be a slow trickle over like 10 to 20.
Keith, it really doesn't take much to build a little bit of hype, does it?
No, and I share Kevin's thoughts. I thought it would take a little time. I was slow myself, didn't get any. I was on, I think, as it sold out, trying to click through, didn't go through. But I think it's the perfect combination. Like, it's relatively cheap. You're getting something that probably looks pretty cool. I think we all agree that most of those, however many teams there are, look pretty awesome. And then you're getting access to a cool event. So it's like kind of the perfect mint where you'd probably pay roughly that amount for just the skin anyway, and you get a little upside of the tournament. So
yeah, and you get the like the pack ripping of the skin reveal. Maybe you get one that you can resell. I know some skins are going to go for, I mean, well above mint price, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's always that nice lotto ticket rush in honor of the Powerball that I did not win. But yeah, I'm excited. And
stick to your day job, Zed.
I know. No comment. But
the skins that are going to sell above floor price are going to be the ones. Maybe when I'm gone, you guys need to do like a grand reveal of which skin Kevin is choosing, and then it's just going to skyrocket.
I haven't even looked through everything yet. I should look through all the rules because there is a tie to the actual countries, right? Is there some? I don't know.
We haven't either. We talked about it on the previous show. Like, we haven't really dug in on the rules yet. There's some sort of team thing where, you're going to want Kevin's skin.
People are going to be mining our OpenSea wallets and trying to figure out which burners are ours.
As you accumulate like 40 of them before you make the announcement.
We're gonna. I think we'll probably buy more than we can mint. I would say we have a lot of horses that we want to put the skins on. So we'll see. Hopefully, we get some good countries we can represent.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So, yeah, good luck to everybody in the public mint, which is I think in 2 days, and it's slightly higher price. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about this class system. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I have it's pretty much like all I think about is Zed, and so I've been thinking a lot about this stuff. This is how I spend all of my time. Wife appreciates it, and I dug through on Twitter, and this was one of the most interesting conversations that I found. Velo Racing. And we'll just go through this whole thread here. So he's asking for clarification around which traits are going to level up, whether it's kind of what we talked about on last week's show, Kevin, if it's just going to be base ability or some sort of combination. You kind of theorized that it would just be base ability. I know, Keith, you have some other thoughts on this. So maybe before we dive deeper in this thread, Keith, how do you think that the level up system is going to work?
Yeah, I listened to your show. Can't argue with anything. We're all just guessing. I don't know. I tend to think there might be more to it with how they're just not giving us the goods right now and saying there's still more to discover. So that leads me to believe that this is going to either function differently for different types of horses or have some sort of randomness as you go up, in level. But BA would be the obvious one. It could just be BA where you're basically just kind of bringing up the floor like that, that main speed attribute of your horse. But I wouldn't be shocked if there's some sort of variance element in there as well. It may not be huge. We know how important variance is and how much that can move the needle, but I wouldn't be shocked if that was included. So maybe I'm just being hopeful, but that's my hope.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It would be nice if it wasn't as simplistic as just, you've leveled up one and you get whatever percentage more base ability added on. So yeah, if there could be some sort of random component, that would be cool, right, Kevin?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. It'd be a little trippy to kind of see like all these A-shaped horses start gaining variance. I'm thinking of like Minted Molly all of a sudden running like a 2-second gap for a win. That would just blow my mind. So it'd be interesting. I'm still in the camp where I think they're just going to kind of turn into better versions of themselves. But yeah, who knows? We're all just guessing here. Like Keith said, when I was making the variance comment, I was just thinking of if there was some moves to be made. And I think there is a solid theory that it's just BA being leveled up. And if that's the case, yeah, then variance is the X factor you can kind of get ahead of the curve on. But as always, it's probably smart to have a little being hedged in all different directions.
I think one thing you just said too is important. Like I agree with you. A better version of themselves is probably the way that works, but that could include like whatever proportional attributes you have between variance, BA, DP, all that. That like the whole thing very slowly goes up. So those with variance are getting a little bit more as they go, but the rest of the group is getting it as well to kind of even it out. So yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it worked in that way.
It'd be really interesting to see, like, I mean, we'll never see it because horses are probably going to level up similarly. But if you had like a level 700 Artois and it was just a better version of itself, but that consistent run it always had would beat like any variance run right now. So you almost need like a level 700 variance horse to even beat that consistent run from a better level 700 Artois. So I don't think we'll see that. It'll probably be 700 versus 700 by that point, unless WAGMI just grinds it to death, which we know they can do. But yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see it play out.
I do think we agree too, because I believe you guys said this last week and we were talking about it privately, but DP doesn't seem to make sense to have that alter as you level up. You turn it into a completely different horse. So unless, it's not impossible that your DP can get stronger. So maybe you move out the spectrum as you go up. That's not impossible, but I do tend to think we're talking more kind of that quote unquote BA and variance.
Yeah, like how would you know where to move it? Like does a mid, which direction does it go? Maybe
exactly.
It starts like just barely marathon. Does it go harder? Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It's tough to move.
Right. I think the only way that works is if you can manually apply the level points yourself, right? And say, no, I want to apply these and I want more long distance preference.
That would
right?
be fun.
So that would be
I love that.
awesome. I think that's like the ultimate holy grail.
Oh man, that guy, I hadn't thought about that. That would take me back to like the old NCAA football, American football days on Xbox, where you can kind of create your player, or I guess like MLB the show has something like that too, where you can kind of create it how you want. That'd be cool.
Right. My quarterback is super slow, but he's got a cannon.
Oh yes, yeah. I went the opposite. I just made him ultra athletic.
Yeah. So again, we don't know any of this. I guess when you were talking about the Artois kind of case there, Kevin, for a more stable horse, just maxed out on base ability and dominating variance horses, that kind of brings me back to my old theory on breeding 2.0 and what John Lee may have been envisioning and what may have happened if we had the catalyst. Who knows? But stable horses kind of outperforming variance horses if you continue to stack more and more base ability and have more and more stable horses. I mean, we just don't know like what was envisioned and how it would have worked if those catalysts did come. But that was kind of my theory, and obviously it hasn't happened here after 7 months or whatever of this breeding 2.0. Moving further on here, though, guys, in this thread, so it did get interesting a little bit deeper in here, where Velo starts talking about his concern with our horses, Kevin.
Yeah, felt a little targeted, but in a good way, right?
So Vila's saying that his concern is more around the Y2Ks and Think Like a Freaks and Diamonds effectively becoming roid ragers. And for those that weren't around back when the bug happened in, what was it, like April of 2021, there were a couple horses that got minted when breeding opened up for like the first time after the real craze and after the reset happened way back in December of 2020. And there were a few horses that got the genetics of like 4 parents, and they were just absolute freaks and they dominated everyone. One of them was Roid Rager, one of them was Escobar, and then I think Jelly Bean was the third one. There may have been a fourth too that I can't remember, but yeah, so they were like unbeatable. So that's kind of what Velo is referring to here. If they're able to max out base ability, and these other horses, like say, I think he refers to Billions. He does refer to Billions here and a little bit later. If they can't reach that same kind of variance level, if you can't improve variance and you can only improve base ability, then we're left with what, Kevin?
This is a trick question. See Keith just licking his chops over there.
I think this is a fascinating topic in general. Like I think the key we need to remember here, I have no idea how this will work. I think it's a valid concern, but with a huge caveat. Like, these horses will get better and they will be freaks, but they're only going to be able to race against similar horses. I think that's what we need to keep in mind here, is these horses will not be picking off lower competition horses, lower level horses, like Roid Rager could have done. I'm not saying that horse did. That horse was obviously a bugged out freak, but if all of these horses are moving up together, we know whatever rating they're getting initially is coming from the underlying characteristics in the DNA of the horse. So they're all going to have different, variance versus base ability levels, but they're going to be rated similarly. So as they move up, you would expect them to also be similar. So I don't know how exactly this plays out. I think it's a concern to be thinking about, but I do think when we remember horses are going to be pitted against similar horses, we need to keep in mind that won't make any of these stand out that far above the other ones. At least at that final stage, there's going to be moving pieces as they go up, but I don't think that's a huge risk.
That's why I keep going back to like the horses that just do something different than the other like best horses with variance, like is the obvious answer, where you're not going to win that much, but the 15 to 20% of the time you get that really good run, that's going to hold. I mean, it's just peer versus peer, but it has more variance than the other. You're just naturally going to have more or better odds to win than the other horses. So I'd still like, that's why I anchor on variance, but they do seem to be shifting at least tournaments and things to the more consistent runners. So it's like, do you want to win? Do you want to qualify for tournaments? Maybe that's what they want, just different rewards for different types of horses.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm with you on variance, like for what we know today, which hopefully is very little. Like, I hope there's still a lot to learn. But variance seems to be that X factor when you put a bunch of these horses that especially the ones being bred that we know are not coming out with the variants that some of these Genesis and older 1.0 horses have. You can get close to replicating it. We've seen plenty of good variance horses come along. But some of these that already exist with that high variance level are going to be set apart if you level them up correctly. If it works out the way we think it might work out, they could have that edge.
Right. That's why you think about the meta right now. Like the meta right now is obviously broken, and the horses that dominate are the ones who just dominate on distance preference and BA. And that consistent run just beats the inferior opponent over and over again. When you get that field that has 12 beasts all running against each other, 12 best horses at sprints. The ones that are going to be the best are the Y2Ks, the Secret Strategies, the Blood Duchesses that have the variants that can actually take a field like that, beating other horses A+ runs.
Yep.
So the more peer-to-peer it is, I think variance is the differentiating factor if you want to win. If it's double up, that's a very different story, but you play to win the game, right?
And we think winning is going to be the fastest way to level up, winning high dollar races, right? They've made it pretty clear. Winning is the ultimate goal, and the more you're paying to enter a race versus a free race, and $100 race versus a $2 race, you're going to gain more XP, right? So if you want to win those big pots against theoretically better competition trying to accomplish the same goal, I'm with you. You want that horse that just has that, whether it be 15% of the time or 25% of the time, that run that just is like almost unbeatable. That's how you win. Now, it's going to be a lot more volatile to your bankroll. You have to be able to withstand 15 races in a row without a win, maybe without a podium. But when you get those wins, you're more than making up for it if you're not doing double up races.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the unknown here, another one of them, there's like 1,000 unknowns here, but another one of the unknowns here is like, is there a chance that variance gets devalued in this power formula and these hyper variance horses like Y2K somehow fall into class 2 and I just dominate class 2 and they have to build up their base ability to get a higher power number? And again, going back to this kind of stability theory, like what if those horses as they progress somehow are able to be consistent, like you were saying, Kevin, with an Artois being so powerful and so stable that like I don't know who's a good, just off the top of my head, the Flick of a Lifetime, like that's a nice variance marathoner. But if Artois,
you gotta go Festus. Come on,
Festus, there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
If Festus's A+ run can no longer beat what Artois is doing like 90% of the time, then that's just a total different meta, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. And then it becomes the game. You have to find a way to grind Festus up enough, in this example, to match the BA. It'd be a grind because it'd be starting much lower if they're not valuing variance. But theoretically, if you were able to grind it all the way up to 700, then you've got Artois with variance, which is absurd.
That's the key that we don't know. Number one, if they do devalue variance initially, those are the horses you want day one because you're probably going to be winning at an outsized rate and you're going to level up that much quicker. But the key to me is like, does a Festus getting to 700, it can't be Artois with variance because my guess is they're going to offset like just how dominant the BA and DP are on Artois with a lack of variance, and to equal out at 700, my guess is their formula, when Festus has way more variance, it's probably capped on the BA part. That's my guess. So like they want to get to an equal 700, but it's all going to come down to how their algorithm equates variance to base ability. And that's the part that gives opportunity for players, but also there's risk in this new system if they didn't appropriately figure out the value between variance and BA. That's right. Where people who know how to play the game are going to take advantage. That's the first place I'm looking to, I don't want to say take advantage, but to, figure out the new meta is like, did they overvalue or undervalue variance versus BA? And you want to go after the one that they undervalued. It could change down the road. There could be a seasons. I know you guys are huge proponents of seasons. I like it as well. But that would be the way to totally kind of dominate the early part of this new 2.0 system.
Yeah, because the other side of the coin is if it comes out, and keeping with the Festus example, Festus is the highest rated horse in the game. And then if that's the case, when it gets to 700, it's just going to get lapped by all these other horses, right? Like you would want a horse that's super upgradable rather than a horse that's already close to their ceiling, because you already know what it can do in its initial state, and you want it to like get as much boost on top of that as possible. But it does, I guess, save on some of the grinding. But yeah, if you see variance horses starting very high, then we are very wrong. And yeah, you want to target those consistent horses.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So Velo kind of gives an example here to elaborate. And this is, I think this is a lot like what you were talking about there, Keith. So in this example, he's given Billions like a 10 out of 10 on base ability and a 4 out of 10 on variance compared to a Dangersome. And we can use Y2K for this example too. Just a hyper variance sprinter. And say that Dangersome or Y2K has a 5 out of 10 base ability, 9 out of 10 variance. And then after they max level up, we end up seeing Billions at 10 out of 10 base ability still and 4 out of 10 variance. So, I mean, I think what you're saying there, Keith, is just not going to work that way, right? Like Billions is going to have somewhere to go. It's just not going to start out at 700.
Well, or even let's just assume Billions is 700, which I don't think will be the case. But let's say Billions has reached what is the equivalent of 700, and the stats are what Velo says there: 10 out of 10 BA and 4 out of 10 variance. In my mind, if that's a 700, a horse, again, Dangersome or Y2K, that is already starting out at 9 out of 10 variance, my guess is the BA only can get to 6, right? Like whatever they have figured out to say a 700 can be a Billions or an Artois with this dominant BA, high DP, and low variance, or it could be Y2K at the start, right? Like it's not impossible for me to envision Y2K is a 600 and Billions is a 600 to start. They both get there very differently and they both can get better, but on a relative basis, they're already the same, right? Picking two random horses, that might not be a great example, but I do think you're going to cap your BA if your variance is way high, and your vice versa. You're probably going to cap your BA if your variance is way low, right? So, or whatever I said.
Any other thoughts on this, Kevin?
No, I think it'll be super interesting just looking at like the initial ratings, because taking that and comparing, we know what horses do against each other at this point, right? Like we've seen it over and over again for the last 9 months at this point. So seeing like, all right, your example, if Y2K and Billions are both 600, that gives us a peek into what like 700 versus 700 will look like for those two horses as well. It just relatively will look better against the rest of the competition. So I think that will tell us a ton, just like right off the jump.
Yep. Day one, like first hour.
We're gonna be diving into that. But yeah, it'll be exciting, and we'll know a lot early on, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I guess my hope is that they make it somehow dynamic so that we can't figure it out. I mean, these data guys are going to figure it out so quickly if it's a static. If the formula isn't complex and somewhat dynamic, they're going to figure out exactly what variance, what base ability, and what distance preference each horse has very quickly, because they've already got the data in rough numbers. If you look at the numbers BG's got and the ZED has got and ZSIM has accumulated. So I think the more mystery that they're able to create in the system, the more sustainable it becomes, and the more discovery and fun that people will have with it. Don't you think, Kevin?
Yeah, but also if they ever like do lifespans, then every time you have an offspring, there's gonna be no data on it, and you're gonna have a number. You kind of discover it all over again. These ones are only super easy to discover because we've seen them run 2,000 times, and there's all the data you could ever imagine on the track on them. So if we do seasons or just the whole influx of new horses, I think we'll spice it up, even if it is a fairly easy to reverse engineer equation.
This is also why I go back to the idea where I hope, and I tend to still think, because of how long ZED has taken to get to where we are and to get to this new update, they've probably thought this through. I trust clearly Facundo knows what he's doing. I think the addition of Ryan, having been a high volume player, is huge for developing something like this. I don't know how much hands-on he's had, but his input, for things like we're talking about right now would be huge, where I would like to think that there will be some randomness as you level up a horse, where it's not just a BA point, a BA point, a BA point every time you go up. It might be a variance point this time. It might be a third of a variance because that equals one BA point, whatever they've figured out, where all of a sudden yeah, you're not going to completely change the trajectory of a horse like Artois, who might start at 600 going to 700, but maybe you do add a little variance because of some randomness as you level up. Maybe a similar horse that starts at a similar level only gets the BA upgrade, right? And then it's now not so black and white. We're still going to have that comparison the first day we get all the ratings, and we can kind of have an idea of how they measured variance in BA and DP. But as the horses start moving, that precision that we have would almost go away because we wouldn't know the actual changes being made to the underlying characteristics. So that's my hope, but we'll see.
Yeah, like the methodology is not complex. Like video games have been doing this forever in terms of having an overall rating and having attributes that are weighted in some sort of way to give you an overall rating. The magic is in what are the weightings to make the game balanced as possible, which is why we have been a big proponent of like having seasons where you have this rating, you should come out up front and say, this is the rating, we're doing this for the first season, but we have liberty to change this every season, and maybe we'll do it on purpose to change metas season after season. Keep it fresh. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't do something like that, because it's such a good safety net in case they botch this, and it also is just like a good way to keep things fresh going forward. But we haven't heard anything on that. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't, but that's where we're coming from there.
Well, yeah, and like you said on last week's show, it made so much sense. It kind of secures the value of those high-end Genesis horses, because change like this can affect those valuations. And if you've always got that baseline and some form of the game, whether it's like the overarching whole game or another aspect of it where they continue to go back and say, call XP a handicap and go with like scratch racing, where it's you lose any XP gains for this, call it a season or call it whatever you want to, right? I think the terminology kind of can lose people. It's like, well, why do we want seasons? We want a game that is like sustainable and long lasting kind of a thing. And I think you can have both, right, Keith?
Yeah, no, I think the seasons idea is a great one. I think for all the reasons you said, both that it protects ZED if there's an issue with the rollout where we know this is temporary going in, but also this idea of you can just change things on the fly. If horse supply is way out of whack, now you have ways of combating that over time without completely disrupting the game or doing a whole new reset, class system, whatever. So I think seasons is a great idea. They might have other ideas that we just don't know about yet to do some similar things without calling it seasons. But yeah, I'm with you guys on that one.
I mean, it also gives you a chance, like, because one big knock of what they're doing with this update is it's turning off some of like the real racing aspect of ZED, where you want like these big pot races that are just based on like, what is the horse and not the video game leveling up stuff. So you could have a season mode where you reset them all at the end of it, and then you have a race to just kick off the season where all the horses are at their true rating. You have your classes, and that would also incentivize breeding, because bred horses that get bred after the update are going to be playing catch up the whole time, right? Like they're going to be weeks, months, or even years behind if there's not seasons. They're going to be trying to get to level 700 while there's already potentially a ton of 700 horses. So doing a reset would give them a chance to catch back up if we're not doing lifespan of horses.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I mean, while we're on this subject, let's just jump over to Keith's conversation, because it ties into all of this. And actually, I saw people asking what BA means on Twitter this week. So it's a good conversation to have. So here's my understanding, and you guys can kind of chime in with what you agree with and disagree with. So somewhere along the way, last summer of 2021, well, in the US it was summer, I guess it was winter in Australia, but I want to say it was Ebbs or something, went on a Twitter Spaces and started talking about how the attributes that horses have and how distance preference works, and kind of revealed some things that honestly I don't know if he should have, because I think it gave away a lot of the game and how things are structured, and it's lended us into this terminology that seems to rub Keith the wrong way that we're going to get into. Essentially, my understanding is that each horse has 3 attributes: base ability, which is just their raw racing power without the other 2 attributes. So the other 2 attributes are variance and distance preference. Base ability is what a horse is at 1,600 meters. That's where there's no distance preference. Then you add in the other two attributes on top of base ability, which is variance, and that's either how consistent a horse is or how much fluctuation there is in their top end run and their low end run. So you see a high variance horse like Y2K, for instance, really fast top end run, really slow low end run. And that's become very valuable in high stakes races because you get all of the really good horses coming against each other, and you need that top end speed to win. And then distance preference. My understanding, and this comes from talking a lot with smart people like Kevin and BG and Souls Vanish, is that distance preference is a linear equation, and it's essentially 0 is no distance preference, and that's how good a horse is at they're going to be best at 1600 typically, or I guess all the time if they have no distance preference. And then it can go up to, let's say, 0 to 100 positive is how good they are at 2600 meters, and then down to 100 negative is how good they are at 1000 meters. So horses aren't necessarily good at 2000 meters or 1800 meters or 2200 meters. They're just good there because the level of distance preference they have with their base ability that they have and variance, and the horses that they match up with at those distances happens to play well there. But distance preference really is just 2600 or 1000 meters. Kevin, did that make sense what I said? You want to kind of clarify what I'm saying?
No, I think you nailed it. And a lot of it has to do with what Keith was saying earlier, where if you're getting a max of distance preference in one end of the spectrum or the other, you're probably giving up either base ability or variance. So that's why you see horses that just have no distance preference having the ability to either be a super variance horse like Diamonds right in the middle, or like I keep using Minted Molly, but that's our pity pointer, where just loaded on base ability and right at 1600, 1800 spot. So since it has the capacity to be maxed out, if you will, at base ability, it's going to do better when there's no distance preference having an impact on the race.
So Keith, you seem to think that this is not a good way to discuss these attributes, right?
I think it's more complicated than it needs to be. And I credit ZSim. Everyone, I think anyone who knows me or has seen me on Twitter or talked to me privately knows I'm a huge fan of ZSim, love other tools as well. But ZSim to me kind of really opened my eyes on how we really should be looking at horses. It kind of put on paper a lot of the things the three of us have talked about now for, almost 2 years, right? So what I really like in this topic about what ZSim did is he came in with no knowledge of ZED, no vernacular, doesn't know the horses when he came in. He was I believe, in real life horse handicapper who was really good at like Monte Carlo simulations and whatnot. Tried to take the same thing and apply it to ZED. Basically said, can I look at race results, normalize times for the funky things that ZED is doing, and then use competition in each race to basically back into the speed and variance of each horse. And notice he uses speed and variance. There's no DP, there's no BA. Variance is the same. That I think we all know, we pretty understand what that is. So the way I like to think about this now, and I would love to change the vernacular in ZED, is we should really just be talking about a speed and a variance per distance. So the distance preference comes in at that last part, per distance. Because Kevin made the point, I think, or maybe Donkey, when you were setting this up, is that some of these horses who fall in the middle, maybe at 2000 preferred distance, right? We don't know exactly what the code is. Is it like a linear thing where like they're getting some partial DP and that's what sets them up there, or whatever? Or is it just competition based? But at the end of the day, ZSim has been able to capitalize and to conceptualize that data into just what is your speed and what is your variance, and then you can just run that at every distance that horse has ever run. And obviously the bigger the sample size gets, the more precise the data is. So when I like to think about these horses, I like to think about speed and variance, and then we can just see where that speed and variance basically meets its maximum potential, and that to me is the distance preference of the horse. Now, it can come in different ways. Some horses get their best distance because their variance might be the highest at that distance. Others get it because their speed is the highest. Think BA, DP combination in the old vernacular. So it's kind of nitpicky for me. if I were explaining ZED to a newer person, I would never mention BA. Distance preference, I think, comes up no matter how you talk about it. But I would just say, look, your horse has a speed and a variance. Your speed at a particular distance or two is going to be better than the speed at the other particular distances. That's where your horse likes to compete the best. It can change over time based on competition, but that's where you should be focusing your efforts. And I think if we think about that way, it actually helps understand breeding as well, because now all you're trying to do is match up the speed and then do whatever you're trying to do with variance of the two horses you're trying to put together. So when I think about it that way, at least for my mind, it helps conceptualize the data a little better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, and Kevin, I'll kick it over to you here. Like, I guess the missing piece is that if all of the distance preference equation is dependent on fields, like you said, if it's going to change dependent on fields, then I think that what you're talking about, Keith, isn't that just like one part of the picture? Like, don't you need that understanding that it is going to change if the strength of the field gets tougher, and that's why you need a large sample for ZSIM to work?
Yeah, so it's not perfect to think about it that way. And if I understand what you're saying correctly, I think that actually already happens today, right? Like if fields in theory keep getting better, a horse that had massive distance preference won't compete because it's that combination of distance preference and base ability that I'm calling speed, right? Your speed maxes out at, let's say, 2,600 to use an extreme. So based on the competition level, you're either going to be competitive there or not. And maybe 24 becomes better because you're more competitive there versus another subset of horses. So the way I think about it is like, you're never going to have a horse that's top speeds are 26 and 1,000. That just doesn't happen. It's always, some sort of bell curve. The bell can be at the very end at 26 or at 1,000, or it can be anywhere in between. And that's where your speed sort of like maximizes itself. And then variance usually is pretty consistent across distances from what I've found. And where that maximum speed meets variance is where you want to race that horse. So to me, I don't know, it helps me, visualize, especially for breeding. That's to me where it kind of clicked, where like people are saying, well, do you want to put BA into DP into variance? And I'm like, no. You want to just find horses where they have similar max speeds at similar distances, and whether you're going for a high variance or a low variance outcome, depends on the parents you want to put together. But to me, that's been a more successful way of looking at breeding.
Kevin, you want to add some color here?
I think it's pretty colorful as he laid it out. I mean, I think it's nitpicky, but I get why it clicks better, and it probably clicks better for someone who's not as in the weeds as we are with ZED, because it's just basically, like you said, speed is that combination of distance preference and base ability. That's why you see it fluctuate as you change distances across the spectrum. Right. But yeah, I mean, basically distance preference getting better as it gets longer is what you'll see for any horse that is a marathoner, and the opposite for sprinter. It is interesting thinking about using ZSIM, what you said about variance, right? Like basically variance is variance depending on like the distance. So if you're trying to figure out if your horse is good early on, you can almost use multiple distances and just kind of stockpile them and figure out, is the variance there or is it not? And then you need a bigger sample to get like the read on the speed, as Keith calls it. But I think I've kind of inadvertently been doing that for early reads on horses. I'd be interested to just find a horse that's been run a ton, say like 1,800 all the way to 26, and see if the variance holds. I'm sure there's some out there.
Because I think what you'll see is, you might be the horse might look terrible if we think of that normal U shape, right? If you have a perfect U-shaped 18 with like, high base ability, to go back to the old term, where, you just have a dominant 1,800 horse. I don't know, use chromatic theory, pony fish, like they're not true U's because they're just so off the charts on BA, but they're really good horses. If you ran them out to 26, I would imagine the first place distribution comes down, the last place distribution goes up, but you're still going to see some amount of view there. To me, that says the variance is probably pretty stable across the distances, but what you're losing is the speed. The speed maxes out at that 16, 18, 2,000, and the speed gets slower as you move to either of the two extremes. that doesn't mean you can't win a big race at probably, chromatic theory. I would imagine if I raced her 100 times at 1,000, she probably can win 15% of them, right? But like, she's just going to come in dead last so much because that speed function is falling, even if the variance function that's pretty high is remaining consistent. So I think your point about discovering horses is spot on. If you can get, in my mind, again, there's going to be small sample size alerts here, but if you can see clearly some sort of U taking shape at almost any distance, the variance is there, and then it's about honing in where that speed maxes out, and that's where you want to be.
Yeah, you can almost bucket them in like thirds, where you have the 22 through 26, use that sample in terms of assessing variance, and then do 16 to 2 and then 14 and below.
Yeah, because the speed won't fluctuate that much between those three. Right.
It's a rough grouping of distance preference to do that. I think it's interesting thinking about diamonds on ZSim, because diamonds is pretty neutral on distance preference. I have a theory it goes slightly sprint, and that's why when you look at 1400, it actually comps extremely well against almost every horse in the game, because the variance is so sharp there. You get a slight distance preference boost for it being slight sprint, but the extreme like Crimson Chins of the world don't really feel the benefit too much. So it's almost like a level playing field on the speed side. And then you have this massive variance boost that enables it to win. I think, it checks out mentally. And I do think it's probably easier for an outsider to think about it, because speed is speed, and we use it in all sorts of different games and races.
Yeah, and so I guess to bring it full circle to the conversation about leveling up horses and why people seem to be speculating that it's going to affect base ability, which to some degree it has to. But when we're looking at speed numbers, what they've said in this first release of information on the level up system is that it's going to make your horses faster, right? And so that kind of median speed, as I think is the term, is that right, that Keith, that ZSim calls it, median speed, is what
whether it be,
we're calling base ability?
Yeah, median, probably average as well. They're going to differ on variance, but median would be that speed function. Yep.
So it could also be, as you're saying, variance too, because that's the kind of top end speed, right?
Yeah, and that's what makes me think that, again, we don't need to, I think we're being too one-dimensional when we think BA is the thing that will upgrade. That might be how it actually works behind the scenes, but the better way to think about it is whatever your horse's bell curve is on speed, and think about, when I say bell curve, the top being basically that distance preference. It could be at 22 and then kind of fall off wherever it is. That whole thing will rise as you level up, which means it's like a combination of like your existing preferences basically just being boosted as you go. And then whether variance actually gets more extreme or stays the same. If it's staying the same on a higher base speed, you're still going to get those great runs relative to that base speed and those bad runs relative to that base speed. So that's, in my mind, how it probably works, with maybe some tweak to the actual variance on that speed. But we'll see.
Any final thoughts here, Kevin?
No, I need some time to think. got me my head spinning a little bit.
I'm going to give you about 10 minutes when the 2.0 goes live. I'm going to check in with you in about 10 minutes. We'll have it all figured out.
We'll have it now. I'm just thinking I'm going to just do some digging on ZSim of all of our horses like that. But the distance preference puts you in a little mental pretzel with the fact that it's just totally relevant, or totally relative to the horses you're racing against in that field, right? Like if you have even like a Supreme Polarity, who is a variance horse, really high base ability, but it has some marathon skew to it, but not nearly as much as like Artois. So if it goes to 2600, it appears a little worse because it's racing against a bunch of maxed out distance preference marathoners. But if you have that horse racing against all sprinters, and you take it to 2600, it's going to get better and better and better and better the longer you go, because it's relative to who's in the field. So that's why I think it's more of a spectrum, like Donkey was saying, where it is relative to who you're facing. And if they get better, you're getting worse.
And I think this is like, to bring it full circle back to breeding again, like people sometimes get so focused on needing to match the exact distance preference they think they have, when I think it makes it easier to think about what is that distribution of speed, where some horses have a more flat distribution where they're very good at multiple distances. Others, usually at the extremes, are only very good at 26 or 1,000. And to me, what that tells you is they'd be even better at 2,800 and 800, because again, it's that spectrum of that bell curve of where you peak out. So when you find these horses, you don't necessarily need to match exactly the two horses, but if you have one of these, third head being a great example, where it's so good at so many distances, you can mix and match with horses of slight distance preference to the marathon, probably slight distance preference to the sprint. You're not going to get the dominant outcome, but you can create some really cool horses that kind of fit in that shoulder, where maybe all of a sudden you start breeding 12 and 1,400 runners if you start breeding third head with some high quality sprinters that at least are not like crazy 1,000-meter sprinter only horses. So I think that's where, when you start to think about it as like this bell curve of speed, you're looking for the areas of overlap when you're breeding, and you're going to get something that basically averages those two curves out together. That's going to be the median outcome for your offspring. And then obviously there's good and bad rolls off that.
A lot of different paths up the mountain, as they say. No, awesome conversation. I think this is it's fascinating to start to look at the new system and how the old system and structures will play into the new one. And I mean, the more of that we have, the better the game is, really. But we kind of ran out of time, guys, on the Lucky Maiden stuff again. I think this was great conversation, and the audience will enjoy it. But we should announce, Kevin, we'll come back to these horses that we have to highlight and kind of our results on Lucky Maiden 8. But we won the overall, and we tied for second. And we won a couple other things too. This was our best Lucky Maiden yet, and we had a 13% profit share we were doing here, Keith. So we ended up netting 3.1 ETH, I think was the number in profit.
Nice.
So I think it was Ribbonville that won our raffle on last week's show. Is going to be getting 13% of our profit, which I had the number written down here.
It'll be like 0.4 or something.
Yes, 0.4. It was
That's
0.4
awesome.
to Ribbonville. So we were talking about on last week's show maybe beefing up the expected value of these, Kevin, but I mean, maybe we don't need to.
Yeah, that was I guess that was about the cap as well as we possibly could have done. But yeah, I mean, I like kind of tying it to the number of entries, right? I think as there's more entries, you need better incentive for it to be worth it. If you're cutting it, their odds of winning, right? 15 ways, 13 ways. So I like tying it to the number of entries.
Yeah, and if we're getting more people buying horses from us, we can afford to give away more. So it works that way.
That's right.
Okay, well, it was awesome, Keith. Kevin, great chatting. Keith, you're at Kkirk. Is it
Kkirk55? Yep.
At Kkirk55 out on Twitter. You guys should all follow Keith. He's criminally underfollowed, as they say.
I'm not that exciting on Twitter. I like to just jump in every now and then, but hit me up on the BA conversation speed. I think it's a good conversation. Kevin, if you find any horses that don't meet what I was talking about, shoot those out too, because I think it's good to check those. You clearly have a pulse on all the different types, so that'll be cool.
Will do.
All right, and follow Kevin out on Twitter at Arbitrage.Run. I'm at Zed Diamond Hands, and please subscribe to the show, give it a like, head over to Arbitrage.Run, and check out our horses available there for breeds and all that good stuff. And we'll catch you guys next week. Keith will be back on filling in for me while I'm away. I'm sure everybody's looking forward to that, Keith.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was awesome.
See you, man.